Oweel sat beneath the neem tree, tracing the edge of her old wooden flute with her finger. The wind moved through the branches gently, as if trying to soothe her, but it couldn't reach the storm behind her eyes. Her flute had always been her comfort, the only voice she truly trusted. When she played it, even the animals would stop to listen. But now, even the birds seemed to avoid her. She was not like the other girls in the village, not loud, not eager to catch a man's eye. She moved like water in stillness, quiet but deep, her gaze always searching. A birthmark snaked from her collarbone down her left shoulder, a twisted vine with thorns, dark against her smooth skin. The elders whispered it was an omen. Some said it meant she had old blood, the kind that called to things forgotten. Others said it was a curse. Inside the compound, her stepmother Madia's voice rose again, sharp like a cracked gourd. "She's of no use here, Salomo. Let her earn something for once." Oweel clenched the flute tighter. Her father, Salomo, never raised his voice, not even when it mattered most. Since her mother died, he had lived like a faded shadow, trailing behind Madia like a man half asleep. He rarely looked Oweel in the eyes anymore. His back bent further with each passing season, his words softening to ash. "She's too young," he murmured. "Too young?" Madia spat. "She bleeds, doesn't she?" Combo offered 3 fat goats, 6 bolts of cloth, and a jar of gold powder. "You want to die poor? Or worse, let her rot in this house eating yam in silence." Oweel listened, heart pounding. Chief Combo. The name tasted like bile. A man with smoke in his breath and blood in his smile. She had seen him once, during a village gathering. His hands never stayed still, always grabbing, squeezing, pressing. The youngest of his 3 wives had vanished last moon. The elders said she ran. The children whispered that she screamed all the way into the earth. She rose to her feet and stepped inside the hut. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting long shadows on the mud walls. "Please," she said quietly. "Please don't send me to him." Madia turned slowly, her mouth curling in disdain. "Who told you to speak?" Oweel looked at her father, but he avoided her gaze. "Baba," she whispered. He shifted on the stool, staring at the worn floor mats. "It's not for me to stop this, Oweel. Things are not easy. You would give me to a man who eats girls alive?" Madia slapped her. The sound rang out like a drum. Oweel's cheek burned, but she did not cry. She would not give Madia the satisfaction. "You think your silence makes you wise?" Madia hissed. "That flute in your hand won't feed you. Won't clothe you. You think it's freedom? It's foolishness." Madia snatched the flute from Oweel's hand and flung it toward the corner. It hit the ground hard, the softwood cracking near the mouthpiece. Oweel's knees gave out, and she sank to the floor beside it. She picked it up gently, holding it as if it were a broken child. Tears slipped from her eyes, quiet and hot, falling onto the battered wood. Her breath shook, but she said nothing. That night, the village drank palm wine and celebrated the fortunate match. Women danced with hollow smiles, and men toasted to Madia's cleverness. Oweel sat alone in her room, her stomach turning. Her fingers moved over her mark, the thorn vine that had always felt more like a question than a scar. The next day, Combo arrived. He was dressed in deep red, a color too bright for his soul. His beard was thick, his teeth gold-plated, and his eyes sharp as hooks. He smiled as if he were already chewing her bones. "I want something different for this bride," he said, stroking his chin as if deep in thought. "I've had silk. I've had lace. But this one must prove herself. I want her wedding dress made of thorns. Not just worn. Sewn into her skin. Let her feel the weight of devotion. Let her bleed for it." Gasps rose in the compound, but no one challenged him. Madia smiled tightly. "Of course, Chief. Anything for your satisfaction." Oweel felt her throat close. A dress of thorns? To be sewn into her flesh? She turned to her father one last time. He stood still, a ghost in human skin, eyes lowered as if the ground held more importance than his daughter's fate. Awil clutched the cracked flute to her chest and said nothing. But inside, something ancient stirred, not rage, not fear, something waiting. They came for her at dawn, before the cock crowed, before even the wind dared to move. Madia's voice broke through the fog of early morning like a knife. Bring her out. The sowing must begin before the sun sees her shame. Awil was dragged from her sleeping mat, the cracked flute still clutched in her hand. One of the village women pried it from her fingers and tossed it into the fire pit. The wood caught quickly, and for a moment, the scent of burning memories filled the air. In the clearing behind the compound, a low table had been laid out. On it rested bundles of twisted vines, freshly cut, their thorns sharp and gleaming with dew, or was it sap? No one knew. No one asked. The vines curled and pulsed as though they were breathing. The tailors, for elderly women with weathered faces and indifferent hearts, stood by with long bone needles and thread the color of dried blood. Awil's eyes widened. She turned to run, but Madia grabbed her by the braid and shoved her to the ground. Don't disgrace us now, she hissed. Be still. Be obedient. Be a wife. Awil fought. She kicked, screamed, scratched. But they were many, and she was one. They pinned her down. Silk bands were wrapped around her wrists and ankles, not with the gentleness of adornment, but with the cold efficiency of captivity. A strip of cloth was tied across her mouth, muffling her sobs. The tailors got to work. The first stitch went into her shoulder, just below the collarbone, exactly where her birthmark began. The vine was pressed against her skin, and the needle was driven through both, skin and stem, anchoring the first thorn into her flesh. Awil jerked violently, a muffled wail escaping from behind the gag. Blood welled up instantly, warm and thick. They didn't stop. Thorns were twisted into patterns, around her arms, across her belly, down her legs. Every needle stroke felt like fire beneath her skin. Some thorns embedded deep, others scraped shallow but wide. The vines writhed as if they enjoyed it, tightening with each stitch. Her blood soaked into the ground beneath her, and still they worked. She fights like a wild thing, one tailor muttered. Madia leaned in, watching with a strange satisfaction. She'll be tamed by the time it's over. They all break, eventually. They bound her tighter each time she twisted in pain. Her eyes rolled back, her body trembling from shock. Every time she tried to scream, the cloth gag held her voice hostage. Even the sky refused to weep for her. A good wife endures, another tailor said, shaking her head at Awil's resistance. She bleeds, but she does not cry out. She is young, the oldest tailor muttered. The thorns will teach her. The hours passed like years. By midday, the vines had been shaped into a bodice and skirt that wrapped her like a second skin, only this one cut and clawed with every movement. Blood oozed from hundreds of wounds. Her body was a battlefield and every inch ached. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. When the sewing was done, they lifted her, limp and soaked in her own blood, and carried her into the abandoned shed behind the house. The door creaked shut, and the bolt slid across. She must be ripened for the wedding, Madia said, brushing her hands. Leave her for the night. Inside the shed, it was cold and silent. Dust curled in the corners like forgotten time. Awil's breathing was shallow. Her arms hung limp from their bindings. Her legs trembled from the weight of the vine skirt dragging at her open wounds. Then, something stirred. Tiny flickers of light began to dance in the dark, faint, at first, like embers floating from a fire. Then brighter. Dozens of glowing moths fluttered down from the rafters. Their wings shimmered like moonlight on water, their eyes tiny beads of gold. They circled her slowly, as if in mourning. One landed on her cheek. Its touch was cool, soothing. Another settled on her chest, right above the stitched thorn at her heart. They moved together like a ritual, not random, not idle. Purposeful. The ground beneath her began to hum. A low, ancient vibration. Her blood, which had pooled at her feet, now shimmered faintly under the moth light. It seeped into the floorboards, absorbed like offering. Her head lolled to the side, her mind slipping somewhere between pain and dream. And then she heard it. A voice. So old it cracked the silence like a forgotten song. Not loud, no louder than a breath. But it pierced through her agony like a blade of light. "Walk," it said. "And the doors will open." Awil blinked slowly. Her lips moved beneath the gag, trying to repeat the word. "Walk." She tried to shift. Pain exploded through her spine, her legs, her arms. The thorns resisted her, biting deeper. But the moths moved closer, their light warming her skin. The floor beneath her glowed where her blood had touched it, faint roots of light spreading from her body like veins through soil. She reached out, or thought she did. Her hands barely moved, but the silk bindings loosened, just slightly. She breathed in and tasted dust, iron, and something else, something older than pain. "Walk," the voice whispered again, nearer now. "You are not meant to lie still." She gasped, and the breath broke her. Her body convulsed in a final surge of pain. Her limbs shook violently, her mouth opened in a silent scream, and then, blackness. Awil collapsed, her head hitting the floor with a dull thud. The moths scattered, then slowly returned to form a glowing ring around her motionless form. She lay there, unconscious, torn and stitched, bleeding and broken, but not dead. Not yet. The sun rose slow and heavy, casting a golden hue across the village, as if the sky itself was reluctant to witness the day. Drummers gathered in the square, striking rhythms too eager for what was meant to follow. Women dusted the path with petals, while young girls practiced dances with stiff smiles. A large white canopy had been erected beside the main road, where Chief Combo's wedding procession would begin, a performance disguised as joy, soaked in palm wine and pretense. Combo arrived mid-morning, already swaying. His robes of crimson and gold shimmered under the sun, but the man beneath was soaked in sour sweat and fermented arrogance. He dismounted from his horse with a grunt, grabbing a jug of wine from a servant's hand before taking his seat beneath the ceremonial cloth. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice loud and cruel. "Where's the thorn bride?" he bellowed, laughing as he tilted the jug back. "Has she softened yet, or must I whip the obedience into her wedding march?" A hush rippled through the crowd. Women exchanged glances. Children clung to mothers' legs. Madia stepped forward quickly, a tight smile stretching her face. "She's been ripened, my chief," she said, her voice full of false pride. "Sewn and silenced, just as you ordered. Let me fetch her." She gestured to two young men to open the shed. One of them hesitated, his hand trembling on the latch. The other gave him a look and forced the door open. A silence thicker than death followed. No one moved. Inside, there was no bride. The floor was streaked with blood, not fresh, but dark and dried into runes of pain. In the center of the room, resting like an accusation, lay Awil's torn flute, its cracked body soaked in red. From the back wall, a trail of bare, bloody footprints led toward the forest edge beyond the compound. Then nothing. No girl. No body. No sound. Madia froze, her mouth parting in disbelief. That can't be." Combo staggered to his feet, face twisted with rage. "Where is she?" Madia turned sharply. "She was here. She must have been taken by witches." "Witches?" Combo spat. "You expect me to believe that she simply vanished into mist? You tricked me, old woman. You and your coward husband." The villagers began to murmur. A few crossed themselves. Some backed away. One old woman whispered, "The thorn bride should not walk." Combo drew his blade and pointed it toward Salomo, who had stayed quiet through it all, his face gaunt and gray. "I will burn this village if she is not returned," Combo growled. "You insult me before the gods." The village elders stepped in hastily, robes swaying as they bowed. "Chief, please. We beg you to wait. The shame is ours. Let us search for her." let us correct the dishonor before the gods see it. You have 3 days, Combo warned. 3. Or I come back with warriors, not drums. With that, he stormed off, his entourage trailing behind like shadows. The celebration collapsed into silence. Drums were lowered. Dancers sat down. Madia stood frozen near the shed, staring at the flute like it might speak. She was taken, she whispered again, quieter now, as if trying to convince herself. The forest, something unnatural took her. But no one believed her. No one said it aloud, but all of them, even the tailors, even Salomo, knew something else had happened. The girl had walked. Alone. Wounded. Bleeding. Into the forbidden edge of the land, a place no one dared to name except in whispers. Meanwhile, far from the village, Awil opened her eyes. Above her stretched a sky of smoke-colored clouds. Around her, trees rose like ancient watchers, tall, twisted, dark with age and memory. The leaves here whispered in languages she didn't know, and the air smelled of moss and forgotten time. She was lying on a bed of old roots, her skin sticky with blood, the thorn dress still clinging to her like a curse. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her spine, her arms, her ribs. Her hands were bruised and raw. The vines tugged and scraped with every movement, digging deeper into her skin. But she didn't cry. Her mouth was dry. Her throat tasted like dust and silence. Somewhere far behind her, the echo of Combo's laughter faded. She turned toward the soundless woods. No paths, no birds, no sun. Just green shadows and tangled branches. The forest of abandonment. Her grandmother once said it swallowed those who no longer belonged to the world. Awil did not belong anymore. She stood, legs shaking. The vines dragged behind her, snagging on bark and root. Her footprints left smears of red on the moss. Each step hurt, but each step mattered. She didn't know where she was going, only that forward was the only direction left. As she walked, the forest seemed to inhale, trees bending slightly, air thickening. The dress rustled like dry leaves in the wind, thorns gleaming wet with blood. And though the forest did not speak, it did not resist her. Because something older than the village had awakened. And it was watching. Each step Awil took ripped new fire through her flesh. The thorns bit deeper with every movement, clawing into her ribs, her thighs, her calves. Her bare feet, torn and blistered, slid across the forest floor, over twisted roots, sharp stones, and thickets of brambles that seemed to part just enough to let her pass, then closed behind her like breath sealing in a secret. Blood soaked her legs, her hands, her back. The vine dress dragged behind her like a shroud, its thorns grinding into her skin with cruel hunger. The pain should have stopped her. It should have ended her. But pain was now her only proof that she still lived. The forest made no sound. No birds. No wind. Only the soft, wet crunch of her bleeding steps. Strange things moved in the trees above, small glowing eyes that blinked without bodies, creatures too thin for shape, too old for names. None of them came near her. Even the shadows seemed to shy away. They watched from high branches and hollow logs, but none dared to cross her path. As if they knew what the humans did not. She walked. Hour upon hour, breath ragged, vision swimming. She lost track of time. The sky above flickered between dusk and dream. Her body swayed, nearly falling with each breath, yet she kept moving. She was not walking to survive. She was walking because something in her had refused to stay buried. A part of her she hadn't felt since childhood. When she was small, long before her mother's death and Madia's cruelty, she would sit under the mango tree with her flute and spin stories to the wind. Her dream, the one she whispered to her mother's lap at night, was to be a palace storyteller. Not a bride. Not a servant. A bearer of truth. A weaver of memory. She imagined standing in the king's court, voice strong and full, sharing tales no one dared tell, tales of sorrow, of witches, of girls who rose when they were meant to fall. But her mother died before she could finish her last song. And when she told Madia her dream, the woman had laughed so hard she spilled yam water on herself. Storyteller? Madia had said. Palace girls are born from silk, not mud. You'll be lucky to find a man who doesn't sell you for a chicken. And so Awil had grown quiet. She stopped telling stories. She stopped playing the flute. But she never stopped listening, to the trees, to the fire, to the old women whispering when they thought no one heard. Now, with blood running down her legs and every inch of her crying out, that forgotten dream returned. Not soft and hopeful, but hard, jagged, sharp like the dress she wore. She reached a dried riverbed, cracked and crumbling like old skin. The trees parted here, and the gray sky reflected faintly in the fractured earth. Awil leaned over a flat stone smoothed by long-gone water. And saw herself. What looked back was not a girl. Not even a bride. She was a ruin made of thorn and shadow, hair tangled with blood, skin marked by hundreds of angry red punctures. The vine dress had begun to grow into her, not just sewn, but melded. Her chest rose with each breath, and the thorns pulsed as if alive. Where her birthmark once rested, a flower, black with a glowing red center, had begun to bloom. She fell to her knees, staring. What am I becoming? Then the air shifted. From across the riverbed came a low sound, like fabric dragging over stone. Awil turned slowly. Standing on the far bank was a figure, tall, veiled in torn silk, with eyes like cracked glass. The woman's skin was gray with death, her face gaunt, her lips sewn shut with rusted wire. Her hands were bound with ghostly red thread that vanished into the air. Awil stared, heart pounding. Who are you? The figure raised a hand slowly, then touched her own sewn mouth. I know you, Awil said, breath catching. You were one of his wives. The woman nodded. Did he kill you? Another nod. The forest hushed deeper. Even the wind refused to speak. The woman stepped forward. Her feet left no mark. She knelt beside Awil and reached out, gently touching the vines on her dress. The thorns curled slightly under her hand. You are not like us, her voice whispered into Awil's mind, not her ears. We were broken before we bled. But you still burn. Awil's throat tightened. Can I stop this? She asked. Can I remove it? The woman shook her head. You must carry it. But it does not have to carry you. She guided Awil's hand toward one of the largest thorns near her heart. Each thorn holds more than pain. It holds memory. Rage. Truth. Let it speak. Awil hesitated, then gripped the thorn. Pain exploded through her chest. But behind the pain, something opened, a memory she had never seen. A young girl screaming in a locked hut. Combo laughing outside. Villagers turning away. The girl's name had never been spoken again. She was real? Awil whispered. They all were, the ghost said. She moved Awil's hand again, to another thorn on her thigh. A new memory unfolded, not her own, but familiar. A tailor trembling as she sewed, whispering prayers with every stitch. A whisper from the old gods she no longer believed in, the girl will walk. The thorn shall bloom. More thorns. More truths. With each one, the dress trembled. The vines shifted, not just a garment of torment, but a vessel of buried voices. Awil gasped as a low vibration ran through her spine. Her back arched. The black flower on her chest opened further, petals unfurling like screams made flesh. From her waist, other buds began to form, tiny blossoms of deep crimson and ash gray, each pulsing with warmth and ache. She looked down. The dress was blooming. Not with beauty, but with stories. With the cries of girls who had no graves. With names etched into petals. With grief made visible. The ghost bride stood. Walk, she said again, her voice echoing. Awil rose, her legs steadier. The pain had not left, but it had changed. It had purpose now. Her body was no longer just broken. It was becoming. Her skin still bled, but the blood glowed faintly where it touched the vines. Her breath steamed into the cold forest air. She looked down the path that led deeper into the woods. "Where does it go?" she asked. The ghost tilted her head. "To the place where truth is feared most." Then, slowly, she faded, her body unraveling like silk in water, her sewn lips the last thing to vanish. Awil stood alone once more. But not hollow. She turned and began to walk again, the dress dragging behind her like a banner. The flowers of pain opened wider. The forest bent back from her steps. Each thorn pulsed with memory. Each step carried truth. And the path, though cruel, did not resist her. The forest gave way to something older. Trees thinned. The air thickened. Time bent. The moss beneath Awil's feet turned black, then gray, then to dust. Her blood no longer dripped, it burned softly against her skin, a quiet heat that reminded her she was still alive. The vine dress clung to her like a second skin, but now, it no longer resisted her. It moved with her, pulsing like breath, the blooming thorns opening slowly with each step. She walked for what felt like hours or days. There was no way to measure time in the realm between pain and destiny. The sky above her pulsed with a dim red glow. And then she saw it. The first gate. Massive and jagged, it rose from scorched earth, an archway made entirely of blackened wood and ember stone, its frame alive with flickers of flame. The air was hot enough to burn her lungs. Beneath the gate stretched a path of glowing coal and molten ash, shifting like the back of a living beast. Beyond it, a thick mist glimmered faintly with gold. Awil stepped forward. The thorns of her dress twitched, uncertain. Gate of ash. This one, she knew without being told, would test not her strength but her stillness. A voice, not her own, not the ghost bride's, spoke into the air. "Walk this fire without cry. Let pain rise, but not fall. If you scream, you remain." The ground hissed as her foot hovered over the first ember. She stepped. Flames curled around her toes, then her soles, then licked her ankles. Her skin blistered within seconds. The vines that wrapped her calves began to sizzle, some thorns turning red-hot. She kept walking. She clenched her teeth so tightly her jaw cracked. Her eyes watered instantly, but not from fear. Every part of her screamed silently. Her bones felt as if they were melting. The fire climbed higher, searing her dress, curling the flowers on her hips. She did not make a sound. She thought of the girls who couldn't scream when they were taken. The ones who had swallowed pain until it drowned them. She carried them now, and they, in turn, carried her. With one final step, her foot hit cool stone. The fire vanished. Behind her, the gate of ash closed with a sound like thunder in reverse. Awil collapsed to her knees, her feet blackened, her skin raw. But she did not cry. Her dress shimmered faintly, some of the thorns had turned to smooth petals, as if softened by her silence. The fabric no longer cut as it moved, it pressed to her like memory. She stood, breathless, and walked on. The second gate waited not far ahead. This one was made of bleached bone, massive femurs, curved spines, ribs sharpened into spears. The arch loomed high, and beneath it stood two towering skeletons, their skulls decorated with cracked bridal veils, their arms holding spears made from the spines of others. Gate of bone. Awil paused. The air here smelled like old blood and unanswered prayers. The skeletons turned their heads toward her in unison. One raised a bony hand and pointed at her heart. "Name them," the voice said. "The ones you wear. Or you will become one of us." Awil's throat clenched. "What?" The second skeleton stepped forward. Its ribs rattled like a drum. "You walk in their blood. Speak their names. Honor them. Or your silence will erase you." Her heart pounded. She looked down at her dress, and saw what had been hidden before. Names. Stitched in thread darker than night, curling along the hem of her skirt, weaving through the vines, glowing faintly in the folds, names of girls who had never been named. She touched the first one. Zine, she was the first wife. They said she ran away. She didn't. He buried her under the yam barn. The bones did not move. She touched another. Kilo. She was 12. He married her after her father lost a bet. She bled to death in silence. Another. Rima. Her mother sewed her into a silk dress. She was burned alive when she refused to dance. The names poured from her like a river. Each one cracked something open in the gate. The skeletons stepped aside slowly, raising their spears in silent salute. As a wheel passed beneath them, they knelt. Her dress trembled with new life, the vines pulsed, and where blood had crusted, blossoms now glowed softly, whispering truths the world had tried to bury. When she looked back, the bones were gone. The path had vanished. Only forward now. The mist thickened. Trees gave way to stone. The air no longer smelled of pain, it was still, utterly so. As if nothing dared disturb this place. And before her stood the third gate. It was not made of ash or bone. It was a smooth arch carved from silent stone, inscribed with symbols older than language. No guards. No fire. No threat. Gate of silence. She stood before it for a long time, waiting. Nothing moved. Then she heard it, not from outside, but from deep within. Her own voice. Whispers of herself as a child. Laughing. Dreaming. Begging. Screaming. Then, silence. Her voice had gone quiet long ago. Not just because of fear. But because the world had taught her it wasn't welcome. Oil closed her eyes. And she began to sing. Not beautifully, her throat was cracked, her breath unsteady. But her voice was real. Raw. The song was not in any known language. It was made of ache and memory, each note shaped by thorns and ghosts. It told the story of a girl sewn into a dress of pain. A girl who walked through fire, named the forgotten, and came carrying the voices of those who could not return. As the song echoed off the stones, the gate began to glow. Then it disappeared. Not opened. Simply gone. As if it had never been there. She stood at the threshold, stunned. Her dress was no longer just vines and pain. It was a shield, soft in some places, strong in others, its petals now inscribed with hundreds of names, and her own stitched at the center. She stepped forward, not as prey or sacrifice, but as a vessel of voices. The palace waited ahead, far beyond the mist. But a wheel no longer walked alone. With each step, the stories walked beside her, sewn into her skin, blooming in her blood, humming in her voice. At the break of dusk, the palace gates loomed like sleeping giants carved of ivory and arrogance. Their shadows stretched long across the land, reaching toward the horizon as if to warn anything unworthy from entering. But Awil kept walking, her breath shallow, her legs raw, every thorn still nestled deep into her skin, some now blooming tiny crimson petals of pain. Her feet, cracked and bloodied, kissed the ground with every step. And with every step, the earth beneath the capital city shivered, not from wind or quake, but from memory. She was approaching not as a bride, but as a reckoning. At the outer wall, 2 palace guards watched her silhouette stumble forward. One leaned toward the other and scoffed. "Another mad beggar," he said. "Look at her, wrapped in vines like a wild goat. She must have crawled here to die," the other snorted. "Let her rot where she stands." But when she reached the first guard, his mocking smirk froze mid-air. Her eyes, dark and burning with something older than rage, met his, and he stepped back, breath caught in his throat. The thorn vines that stitched her dress moved slightly, as though sniffing the fear on him. The scent of blood, old and new, clung to her like incense. He fumbled for his spear, but it clattered to the marble ground. Awil didn't pause. She walked right past the guards without a word. The massive palace doors, which had remained shut for generations unless pulled open by many hands, groaned and creaked. But Awil did not touch them. They opened by themselves. The sound was like ancient wood remembering its roots. Inside, the great palace hall stretched endlessly, its pillars carved with the deeds of 1,000 kings, none of them noble. The ceilings were domed with gold, the floors so polished they reflected her broken body like a mirror of contradiction. The courtiers gasped. Servants paused mid-step, their trays rattling. A silence fell, thick and oppressive, as the girl and Thorns stepped forward. From the upper gallery, a figure emerged, regal, tall, and wrapped in black and gold silks. The Queen Mother. Her presence was heavy as incense, eyes lined with kohl, lips tightly drawn in curiosity and suspicion. But when she saw the girl's birthmark, partially exposed on her shoulder through torn cloth and thorn vines, her face paled. "The vine mark," she whispered, clutching the edge of her shawl. "It cannot be." Whispers rippled across the gallery. "Is it her? The one they spoke of? The cursed child?" But the Queen Mother did not blink. She descended the stairs slowly, never breaking her gaze. Long ago, when she was a younger queen, she had heard an old prophecy whispered in the dying tongue of her grandmother, the last of the forest women. A girl will come clothed in pain, bearing the vine mark. She will not kneel. She will not weep. Her steps will bleed the rot from the throne. She will wear no jewels, only truth. She will not be crowned, yet all will bow. Now, that girl stood before her. Not dead, not shattered, but blazing with something uncontainable. "Who are you?" the Queen Mother asked, her voice shaking for the first time in decades. Owiele's cracked lips did not part. But her dress moved. The thorns twisted, some retracting into her flesh, others blooming petals that shimmered like fireflies. The names of other girls, stitched into her hem with their pain, seemed to hum. Before an answer could form, a voice thundered from behind the crowd. Arrogant. Loud. Brutal. She is mine. Chief Combo. His voice rolled through the hall like a war drum. He strode forward, reeking of wine and fury. His hands were stained with the oil of roasted lamb, his mouth red with palm wine. He pointed at Owiele like one points at property. "She was promised to me. This is a wedding day. And he paused, noticing the dress closely, has been fitted with the sacred thorns as I requested. You all bear witness." The Queen Mother did not respond. But the vines did. Before anyone could move, the thorns on Owiele's dress pulsed. Not with fear, but with recognition. Combo took a step closer. And the vines lashed out. Dozens of thorn tendrils snapped from her gown like awakened snakes, wrapping Combo's wrist, slashing his arm, tearing his embroidered robe. He shrieked, but the thorns did not stop. They dragged a strip of skin from his chest and embedded themselves in the meat of his shoulders. He dropped to his knees. "What is this witchcraft?" "You asked for thorns," the Queen Mother said coldly. "But perhaps you never knew what you were summoning." The palace guards rushed forward, but were stopped by a sudden tremor beneath their feet. Cracks spidered through the marble floor. The stained glass windows above shattered inward, and the scent of old forest air swept through the palace, musky, strange, and ancient. Owiele still had not spoken. But her presence was louder than thunder. A seam down the front of her stitched dress opened like a blooming flower. Inside, the hidden flute, broken, bloodied, fell to the ground. As it clattered on the palace floor, a note rang out, impossibly sweet and piercing, echoing in every direction. The Queen Mother dropped to her knees. "She is the one," she breathed. The palace remembers. The palace doors, now wide open, remained so. No soldier dared shut them. No noble dared move. Combo lay curled and moaning, vines still writhing over his body, his blood joining the trail Owiele had left behind. And she stood, silent but sovereign, her thorns no longer chains. They were her crown. The hall was built to silence people like her. High ceilings designed to make even kings feel small, stone floors that had swallowed the pleas of countless wronged girls. But today, the hall of judgment could not contain what had arrived. Owiele stepped forward. Her feet were bare, crusted with dried blood. her arms, marked by the journey through gates that broke most. And her dress, no longer just thorns and suffering, pulsed with a life of its own. It shimmered faintly, each stitch lit as though 100 stars had been trapped in the fabric. The murmurs of the royals and elders stilled. Even the guards at the edge of the room found themselves shifting uneasily. Owiel did not bow. She did not ask to speak. The dress spoke first. It writhed, not violently, but with purpose, like a creature preparing to awaken. The vines curled and uncurled. Petals made of dried blood opened slowly. Thorns shimmered like glass. She reached for one. The elders gasped as she pulled a long, jagged thorn from the hem near her hip. Her fingers bled instantly, and yet she did not flinch. She held it up, voice soft but slicing the air like a blade. "This one," she said, "belongs to the girl they stitched shut." The thorn burned golden in her hand, and then burst into a floating image. Gasps broke out as the air shimmered into a vision, a young girl, lips sewn closed, lying beside a river, weeping silently as men passed her by. She cried for days. Her voice never returned. But her silence lives in me. Owiel let the thorn fall. It dissolved before it touched the ground. She reached for another. This one curved, crooked and dark. "This thorn is from the night of screams," she said. When the village heard but turned their faces. The image that rose from it showed a child curled under a bed, shadows of heavy feet moving outside the door, a scream strangled in the throat of someone too young to know why pain had come. Someone banged the door in the memory, and in the real hall, people flinched. There were many nights like that. This dress remembers them all. More thorns now. One by one, she pulled them. Each time, a story emerged, of girls betrayed, mothers silenced, aunties who knew but did not act, stepmothers who offered beauty in exchange for obedience, and kings who accepted daughters not as people, but as currency. Then she reached her chest, near her heart, and pulled a thorn embedded deepest. "This is mine," she whispered. "My stepmother's betrayal." The image formed slowly, a younger Owiel standing at a doorway, a bundle in her arms, her stepmother's eyes hard with false kindness. "She told me I was going to serve the kingdom. But what she handed me to was Combo." And now, at last, she turned to face him. Combo, lounging at the edge of the hall, sneering. His face had twisted into mockery and impatience, but that smile was dying. "She served you many," Owiel said, her voice growing steadier. "But I am not yours." He stood then. His voice rang out. "This is madness. Her mind has been poisoned. She is nothing but a—" But the dress moved before he could finish. Vine shot from Owiel's sides, lashing toward Combo with speed and fury. They didn't strike to kill, not yet, but wrapped tight around his arms, his mouth, yanking him to his knees. His cries were muffled. And then the thorns began to show his truths. The vines held him still as images burst from his body like rot from a split fruit. One showed a girl pushed into a pit, her hands tied, Combo smiling. Another showed him taking gifts from village elders, accepting daughters like livestock. A third showed his private chamber, the same bridal necklace, reused for every girl. "No," he howled, finally breaking free of the vines, but it was too late. The room had seen. The elders backed away. Some stood in disgust. One of the palace scribes began tearing pages from his records, weeping. And then came the voice that stilled them all. It was the Queen Mother. She rose from her chair, slow, deliberate, her eyes glassy with grief. "I knew," she said hoarsely. "Not the depth. But I knew." She stepped forward and looked at Owiel, not as royalty to subject, but as a woman to another woman. Her eyes dropped to the dress. "The vine mark," she murmured. The prophecy was not about a queen. It was about an avenger. Behind her, Combo struggled to rise again, snarling. "She's cursed. You'll see. She carries death." And Owiel answered him at last, voice low and rich with memory. "Yes. I carry every death you thought would stay buried. Then she looked to the gathered crowd, nobles, guards, elders, wives, daughters. She is not the only one who knew. You all knew. Or suspected. Or turned your faces. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. The dress shimmered again, brighter now. It no longer clung like chains. It billowed softly, the thorns resting like feathers. The weight was still there, but it had shifted, no longer a burden. Now, a blade. I was not sent here to marry, a wheel said. I was sent to return what was taken. She walked to the center of the hall. One last thorn in her hand. The final one. This, she said, is for the stories that were never told. And she stabbed it into the marble floor. The ground cracked beneath her. A sharp sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. From the crack, vines began to grow, spreading fast, red and green and glowing, like veins coming to life. They wrapped around the columns. Around Combo's feet. Around the throne. Then stopped, holding. A wheel stood in the center, her body lit from within, her dress alive with hundreds of flickering threads, like fireflies trapped in mourning cloth. She did not ask for justice. The room gave it. One by one, people began to kneel. Not to worship. But in reckoning. A scribe spoke, Combo must be stripped of title and put on trial for the taking of daughters. An elder cried out, let the girls speak. Let them speak all. And someone whispered what others were too afraid to say aloud. She is the one. The bride of thorns. Not a queen. Not a ghost. Something in between. The dress quieted. Its vines untangled gently. The air was still. And in that stillness, stories once hidden found breath again. The throne room was silent. Combo had been dragged out, bound by the very vines that had once sown a wheel-less suffering. His roars were now muffled, drowned by the eyes of a kingdom that had seen too much and heard too little, until today. The king sat slumped in his golden chair, his robes too heavy with shame. His crown, a rusted thing polished daily, trembled in his fingers. He looked at a wheel, no longer a child, not even a bride, but something the palace walls themselves remembered. In her presence, time seemed to slow, the air thick with unspoken stories. He stood, slowly, painfully, as if shedding centuries of denial. His voice was hoarse, but steady. You walked through what none of us dared to see. You bore what we all chose to forget. You wear truth as others wear silk. I am no longer fit to sit where silence has ruled. Take this crown, not because you need it, but because the world does. Gasps moved through the court like wind through tall grass. A wheel stepped forward, the echo of her bare feet sticky against the marble. The vines of her dress no longer pierced, they whispered. They glowed with soft light, as if the pain within them had been repurposed, transformed into something holy. She looked at the crown. Then at the broken elders. Then at the row of young girls peeking from behind guards, their wrists wrapped in old rags, their eyes wide with the possibility of becoming either stories, or stains. I do not want a throne, she said. Her voice was strong now, not cracked, not silenced. But I will not leave this place as it was. The vines that clothed her pulsed once, then began to loosen. One by one, they curled away from her body like leaves falling in spring. Where thorns had pressed into her flesh, now soft petals bloomed. They dropped to the floor and melted like ink into the marble, leaving behind names, dozens of them, etched faintly into the stone. Names no one had remembered. Names of those who had bled and disappeared. The final thorn fell, and in its place, a simple gown remained, woven of light vines and fine thread, marked not by blood but by stories stitched in golden thread. It clung to her like memory, gentle but impossible to forget. She turned to the king. I appoint a council, she said. Not of lords, but of daughters. Girls who were nearly erased. Women who were made small so men could feel large. Let them govern. Let them rewrite what was written in shadow. Murmurs erupted in the hall. Some elders frowned. But many, especially the silent servants who had lined the room for years without being seen, began to nod. One by one, orphan girls, battered widows, maimed midwives, and mute wives stepped into the circle of light that followed a wheel. Some touched her dress. Some bowed. Some simply cried. The old king, still holding the crown, stepped back. He handed it not to one, but placed it gently on the floor between them all. "Rule as one," he whispered. Then, without instruction, the guards lowered their weapons. Drummers began to tap softly, the rhythm not of war, but of beginning. From somewhere in the high balconies, a faint sound stirred the air. The whisper of a wooden flute. No one held it. Yet it played. A wheel turned toward the sound, and the crowd followed her gaze. Her old flute, once left behind in that cruel shed, broken by her own fall, now hovered midair, its mouthpiece glowing, its notes carrying like wind. She smiled. It played the melody of her childhood, the song she once made up while dancing barefoot near the yam fields, when freedom still had a taste and stories still belonged to her. Now, that same song wrapped around the pillars of the palace. Around the hearts of the watchers. Around the girls who had no songs left. She stepped out of the throne room. She did not look back. As she walked through the courtyard, flowers bloomed in the cracks her blood once touched. Birds flew low, as if following her wake. Her gown flowed like water, whispering stories to the wind. Wherever she stepped, the ground shimmered with quiet memory. Outside the palace gates, villagers had gathered in fear and rumor. But when they saw her, they fell silent. Not because of majesty, but because something in them recognized something in her. She did not speak to them. She simply opened her arms. The flute played louder. And then, a voice echoed from the palace walls, a royal decree signed by the king, sealed in truth and thorn. No daughter shall be sold. No truth shall be silenced. And so, the bride they stitched into a dress of pain became the one who unstitched a kingdom. And the doors? They stayed open. They say she still walks. Long after the crown was placed at the feet of broken women, and the laws were carved into the stone of the kingdom square, her name is spoken in hushes, not out of fear, but out of reverence. A name too powerful to say casually. A name that stings if said with a lie on your tongue. In villages where girls are still sent away in silence, where stepmothers still whisper curses behind sweet smiles, where fathers count their daughters as coin instead of kin, that's where she is seen. At the edge of night, when the sun has just slipped behind the hills and the sky is bruised purple, some claim to hear it, the soft piping of a wooden flute. No footsteps follow, no voice calls. Only music, drifting like wind through thorn bushes. And with it, a figure. A woman in a gown stitched with red thorns, her face veiled in shadows, her feet bare. She carries no torch, yet her body glows with a soft, pulsing light. Her presence is not loud. It is steady. Watchful. Heavy. Children say she moves between trees, brushing their trunks as if reading the stories hidden in their bark. Mothers say she appears only when something wicked is being planned. Some believe she listens at the windows of fathers who raise fists. Others say she appears in dreams, pressing a thorn to the lips of the guilty. In one village, a girl claimed she saw the woman braid her hair through a window crack, whispering a song that untangled lies. In another, a thief's tongue turned black after he accused a girl falsely. And always, just before, there was the flute. So now, mothers teach their daughters that song. Not the one sung in the palace courts, but the old one, the one a wheel sang to herself in the dark, back when she had no name. Girls hum it while sweeping floors or plucking beans. They stitch it into cloth. They carry it inside them like a flame. And in the palace garden, there grows a vine, quiet all year, until the day she arrived. Then, without fail, it blooms blood-red. A thorn for every truth once buried. A flower for every girl who will never be.